There's a secret room with tons of broccoli.
There's a secret room, dude. Yeah,
That's amazing.
seriously. There's plenty of broccoli in there.
Well, welcome to New Game Plus. You're listening to a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game, and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name's Kenny.
I'm Nolan.
And this is episode 172, and today you're in for a real treat because in this episode, we have a special guest joining us once again.
Hello. I'm all quiet here.
That's her. She is a self-proclaimed British gamer girl that loves retro video games. On her YouTube channel, she has well over 1,000 uploads of high-quality content featuring everything from Let's Plays to reviews to retro haul reveals and just so much more. We are thrilled to have her join us on the podcast today. So can we all welcome Gemma to the show?
Hello.
Welcome,
Gemma.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. This is awesome.
Hey.
I appreciate it.
We are thrilled to have you. Would you please just take a moment, introduce yourself a little bit further to our viewers?
Okay. My name is Gemma. I'm based in the lovely United Kingdom. It's raining here, guys. You may be able to hear the rain hit the windows.
Oh, I wish.
You also might be able to.
Well, I know.
You also might be able to hear by her voice that she's British as well from the UK.
I certainly am. Have any of you been to the UK or not?
I wish.
No.
It's
No.
on the
I
bucket
wish,
list
yeah.
for sure.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. So if you do come over, I'll show you the games room. We've got a massive games room. It's all showcased on my YouTube channel anyway. And I'm kind of pretty hot on Instagram. Instagram is my second favourite social media. So come and say hi there as well.
I will say that my wife and I are going to London in a few months. How close?
Ooh.
Anywhere close?
I am about an hour and a half north of London, so it's not too far, but by British standards, that's like a million miles.
Yeah, like you'd
You know
never
what I
travel
mean?
that far, sure.
Yeah, that's almost my drive to work every day. That's
That's
nothing.
nuts. Yeah, that is crazy. Gemma, when we have guests on the show, we love to bring before them a series of rapid fire questions, each of them kind of uniquely tailored for our particular guests. They're largely unrelated questions, and the goal is to not think too long about any particular question or answer, but to just go with your gut. The first thing that comes to mind, give an answer, even if it's not fully thought out or fleshed out. Are you down for the challenge?
I am down for the challenge. Let's get it.
For the challenge. All right.
do
So
this.
the rapid fire round for our guest, Gemma. We're going to start with some favorites.
Okay.
What is your favorite day of the week?
Friday.
It's Friday. What is your favorite type of coffee?
Oh, vanilla. I like vanilla.
Favorite type of tea?
Yorkshire tea.
Favorite book?
That's a hard one.
Oh, there's so many. 1984, George Orwell.
Nice.
Favorite item in your gaming collection?
Wow. I have some Akira film cells, so I love them. I treasure them.
What is your favorite Final Fantasy?
10.
Yeah, good answer. What is your favorite video game console?
Favorite video game console is the Super Nintendo.
Do you have any pets?
I have 4 cats.
4 cats? You're a cat lady.
I am a cat lady and I'm about to adopt a dog, so I'm like, yes.
Nice. What are their names, the cats?
I have Squeak, Jimmy, Libby, and Husky.
Aww.
Those names are great. Are you kidding?
Do you have any nicknames?
No, just Gebs. People call me Gebs.
Gebs. Do you snore?
No.
Who was your first celebrity crush?
Angelina Jolie.
Good answer. Do you believe in fate?
Yes.
Are you often late?
Yes.
What is your favorite
Never
quality in a
rhyme.
mate?
favorite quality to mates? Loyalty.
I just keep going. What Harry Potter house are you in?
I'm not a Harry Potter fan, sorry.
Ooh. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Interesting. I'll have to hear more about that. Did you sell your entire PlayStation 3 collection to buy a wedding ring?
Yes, I did.
Wow, I had no
Yes.
idea. Do you believe in ghosts?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe in friendly ghosts?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's a good thing, because in this episode number 172, we are going to talk with you, our guest, Gemma, all about our retro game of the week that just so happens to be about a friendly ghost named Casper.
Casper.
Overview.
So Casper, I have a really hard time not saying the friendly ghost because we did not play Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Because that's probably a game.
It is a game, and it's separate from the one we played. In fact, this is one of those games that there are loads of variations of. Casper was a big deal when, on movies, the movie, when it came out back in the day, and everyone got pretty hyped about trying to make money off of it, like every video game happens. So we played the PlayStation titled Casper. Just Casper. It's published by Interplay. And
you might know Interplay. That tons of great retro titles. That's
Lots
like
of them,
Baldur's Gate, the first couple of Fallout games, and Earthworm Jim even.
Here's the deal. Nobody's heard of any of those games.
But those are huge titles, and some of
Casper
and all
is
those
probably what brought people
to Interplay?
play titles like Baldur's Gate.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You think whatever you'd like.
And so this version of Casper happened on a couple of different ports. Again, we played the PlayStation version, and is a puzzle game where you're kind of top-down view, moving throughout this sort of pre-rendered mansion, and you're sort of action-adventure puzzle solving with Casper. It happens in a couple of different acts, and you go through a series of finding clues and unlocking doors and upgrading your ghost to see if you can kind of solve the puzzle. So very, very puzzle heavy. So far as to the point where you literally are collecting puzzle pieces. So plays a little bit different than the other games.
Painting pieces.
I mean, it literally calls them jigsaw pieces.
Jigsaw paintings. You don't know jigsaw paintings?
Okay, so they're paintings. They're puzzles. I don't know. It was confusing to me, but played this game at the suggestion of our wonderful guests. So can we just do a quick pivot and get a little bit of story on why this game is a favorite of yours?
Yeah. I mean, I first played this with some of my best friends back in the day, Gareth and Damien, and they were like the cool kids on the block, You could probably think of some of yourselves, like really cool kids, had all the latest games, and, Tomb Raider was out and all these really high profile games, and then this random Casper game came out, and I was like, no, I'm all right, dude, I'm going to pass, And then when we played it, we were I was sat around with his family and we were really, really into it. And I just absolutely, I don't know what it was back then that captivated me so much about this game. I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. But I've always been fascinated as a kid, like a really, really super young little girl. I used to love top-down plans of like shops and houses and things. So I think that kind of just maybe like stuck with me. And then I just loved top-down games. I still do. So I love it.
Are you a fan of the movie?
I like the movie, but it's not like I'm a fan of the movie like I am like Terminator 2 or Aliens. Do you know what I mean?
Nice. Yeah, for sure.
I haven't watched Casper the movie in a long time, but I remember when it came out, I watched it soon thereafter and loved the movie. My wife and I sat down this week. We didn't watch the full movie, but we did pull up like some key clips that we had remembered, like when Casper is.
I've never seen it.
Spoiler alert! Come on, it's 95.
I've never seen it. I have
Here's
to
the deal.
confess.
I'm pretty sure I watched this movie, but I didn't remember it. And so, Dustin, when 3 minutes into your first play this week, you dropped the ending of the movie.
Oh no! Yeah,
I was
you
not
did,
happy
actually.
with you.
Get
can go
over
ahead.
it. If you can't have a 95 movie spoiled for you, then you're not
This was
going
on
to
the
go see
watch
it now.
list.
No, when like we pulled up when he, as a boy, walks down the stairs, or like
He was
her
a
first
boy?
kiss, and just different moments like that are key, like imprinted in my mind from this movie. This movie was big. This movie was successful, and this movie is overlooked. I will say that because I read this week, and it's insane to think, but this is the very, very, very first feature film to have a fully CGI character in the lead role
Interesting and hard to believe.
Wow.
out of any other one. And
Yeah.
like Toy Story and everything else takes over as like the main thing, but Casper was the very first one, and they did it remarkably well.
Yeah, it was really polished. I remember like back in the day watching it, and you were just like floored by the CGI. I mean, you watch it now, the movie, it's obviously you can spot the flaws, but back then it was phenomenal. It was wicked.
Not all video games that are made from movies are good. In
What makes you
fact,
say that?
most of the ones that we've played on this podcast based on movies are horrendous.
Let's name a couple. Home Alone 2.
Well, in my opinion, Home Improvement.
That's a gem. And
Not a
don't
movie,
you
played
dare.
but yeah.
Jim, we played a Home Improvement game on this podcast where you're
Have you
Tim,
heard of that show?
the Toolman Taylor.
Oh my goodness.
Are you familiar with the show?
Oh, I am. I watched it growing up.
You remember?
Wow.
You remember when he went around to like a dinosaur world and a space world and like in Egypt and like, killed aliens and dinosaurs with his chainsaw?
It's all very vague. I think I must have repressed it in my mind. But as you're saying it, I'm like, I can remember.
Any others that you can remember off the top of your head, guys, of like movies?
I mean, we
Jurassic
played Toy
Park,
Story,
we
but I
always
like
talk
it.
about being
Jurassic
the
Park,
worst.
yeah, Toy Story, even, and so most of them are bad, but and here we won't say whether this is a good or bad game yet, but I will say that, like in the vein of most of those games, this game is nothing like the movie. I mean, it's set in Whipstaff Manor, and you've got the familiar characters, but it's not really building out a story like much in the game as it does in the movie.
I don't know if it would work with like a massive story behind it with the game. I mean, there's little snippets where you meet Kat and her dad, and you get a little bit of dialogue. But for me, it's just about like the puzzles and the exploration, and it's
And,
think that's fair.
in a puzzle game, you don't have to have robust story. I mean, it's a puzzle
Right.
game, and so if it falls into that genre and you're doing puzzles well, then that makes for a good game.
right. Yeah, carries it well.
But the question is, does this puzzle game do puzzles well? And we'll talk about that in our gameplay section.
Gameplay.
Okay, so you start this game as Casper, obviously, and he's a little translucent and hard to see. So I'll just throw that out there now, and I'll take opinions on that when I'm done.
I mean, he's a ghost.
I know, but like at times I was like, they should have made him a little more prominent on the screen. But anyways,
A ghost?
He's a ghost.
Yes.
I think he is
Yes.
quite prominent. Yeah, he's you can see him quite well.
I'm
His
alone
big
in
ol'
this, but I'm
head.
standing by it now. So, puzzle base, you're in this house, and the first thing, the first thing that happens is you pick up a piece of broccoli, and you're like, hold on. And Dustin experienced this as well in his first play. He's like, am I eating the broccoli? Am I going to use it later? So you're collecting items, and that's a really big part of this game. And I would like to argue that it reminds me a lot. I'm going to make this comparison early, and y'all can shoot me down. I don't care. Of Resident Evil.
You just compared Casper the friendly
Yes.
ghost to Resident
Yes.
Evil.
Yes.
How does Jill Valentine walk around like scoffing broccoli and carrots? Hey,
Yeah, you missed that part of Resident Evil.
Oh no, did I? Damn.
You must have. So the collection aspect, and yes, tons of games do collection, and that's not unique to Resident Evil. However, I really felt it with how many locked doors that you're having to deal with. Not only that, but the items that you're collecting, the puzzle pieces that Kenny was talking about, along with some of the other puzzle elements of the game. It's Resident Evil, but kid friendly with a Casper skin.
That's a stretch for me.
Of course it's a stretch, but that's my opinion.
I think it'd be a really good crossover with like Casper and like Resident Evil just mashed together, and Whipstaff and Jill Valentine going around.
Yeah, Casper's the ultimate like evil or bad guy in that film. Casper the unfriendly ghost.
Ooh.
No, that's not good.
I like the other way, where it's actually a Resident Evil game that's happy and uplifting.
So this game is set up in 3 major acts. And so act 1, your goal is to make friends with Kat and her dad. And so you have to go around. The gameplay is all the same. You're doing puzzles. There's different additions here and there with the upgrades to Casper and some of his abilities, which we'll talk about. But mainly you're finding keys, you're finding buttons, and those unlock doors, and then you find these missing painting pieces or jigsaw puzzles. You assemble the painting, you get a power up, and then you kind of rinse and repeat that whole thing. Along the way, of course, you're eating broccoli,
carrots,
carrots. Which
apples.
is that? I mean, is that a part of the movie? I genuinely don't remember.
I don't think it is it? I mean, there is that scene when they're in the kitchen and Casper's making loads of like pancakes for his uncles, and they're just eating it, and it's just all dropping on the floor. And
well, this video game might be the video game that features broccoli most prominently. Is that fair to say?
I doubt that's the case.
I never thought of it that way. Actually, you're selling it in a whole different light to what I like.
Wait, you don't like these yet? So broccoli and Resident Evil. You didn't think we were going to be talking about those 2 things? Wait,
I never put them together.
Kenny, what game features broccoli more?
I don't know.
Uncooked,
but I'm sure there is. There's so many video games out there
Ooh.
that I'm sure broccoli plays a somewhat major role in one of them.
Well, you might not be wrong. Act 1, you're making friends with Kat and her dad, so you're going around solving those puzzles, and you're finding an item to give to Kat and an item to give to her dad. So their love language must be like gifts. And what is it? A rose for Kat, and what is it for the dad?
A book, I think.
A book?
Yeah, it's a book.
That sounds right. And then in Act 2, it's reassemble the Lazarus machine. And so if you remember from the movie, the Lazarus machine is what makes a ghost not a ghost anymore. But I think that's what it does.
Turns him into a fleshy.
But just for a short amount of time. I don't think it ever works permanently, because once you're dead, you're dead. And then Act 3 is find the cellular integrator, and that's just another device, another machine. And but again, all of that is you're doing the same thing. You're solving these puzzles. You're going throughout the many, many, many rooms of Whipstaff Manor. And not only that, you're going out on the grounds too, in this ridiculous garden maze as well.
In the maze, yeah. I have this like weird thing though. Like, if you were a ghost, surely you'd be able to go through all those walls.
Oh, it bothered me the whole time.
Like,
I love
dude,
that. Yeah.
Honestly,
the
yeah.
whole time.
I was
and
like,
the eating. All of the ghostly things that he couldn't do. For a game, especially like an exploration puzzle game, you have to have those limitations. But it drove me absolutely crazy that he couldn't just float through the walls.
However, it would have been a hilarious puzzle game if it sets it up to be like this big elaborate like labyrinth or like maze, and then you're a ghost, so you just can kind of just go through all of it all.
Win in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Gemma, I gotta ask, what about the gameplay really drew you in back in the day when you played with your friends? Like, when you picked up the controller, what really hooked you about the gameplay?
I was terrible at it, if I'm brutally honest. So for me, it was just like a challenge, and it was one that we kind of all chipped in and played together. Even though even it's like one player, we could all sit around the TV, and it was one of those moments that was really, I don't know, like collaborative, if that's the right word to use. I don't know what it is. It's just really heartwarming, and I have such fond memories of it. But now I look back and I'm like, dude, seriously, you could have floated through that wall. Come on.
Here's the thing. So in my experience this week, I did a first play in my videos on YouTube. I think Kenny's already referenced it, but you can see my very, very, very first experience with this game. And I think I filled out the first painting there. I progressed all the way to where I was like at the end of Act 2, right near the end. And I could not find my way around Whipstaff Manor. I kept getting completely confused. And I even tried to look up for a guide online. I think there's one, and it's written by a 3rd grader. It's so hard to follow.
What?
And
I can see that.
And like, there's no maps or anything like that, so you don't have any help like that. You need to pull out a pencil and a paper, and you need to create your own map as you go throughout here. And not only that, you eventually you not only go through doors, you find these vents, and they take you to random rooms in the manor. And so I got lost and couldn't find out what I was doing, but in my search for a walkthrough, I did find some codes, and so eventually I was able to like trick the game to where then as Casper, you know how you use the L1 and R1 buttons to lower Casper or raise Casper?
Yeah.
You can do something where you kind of confuse the game and where you can raise yourself over all the
way
walls.
For real?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
That's so much more lore accurate that I actually don't even mind.
I was completely for it. So then I was just going over all the walls, getting all the keys, unlocking all the chests and doors, and allowed me to progress a little bit further and continue to enjoy the game.
You do miss out on all the like joy though of
Discovery,
finally
sure.
solving a puzzle.
Right.
Like there's a lot of them that are frustrating because you're right. This map gets really big really fast. You start kind of small, but as you unlock new areas and have to kind of do the back and forth, go flip a switch, go find something, go, refill your bucket with water, whatever else. It's tough, but those couple of moments where you unlock a new skill, so you suddenly have a whole bunch of new areas that you can go that you couldn't before, or where you solve some kind of like little puzzle, like you put out the fire for the first time and then let yourself like ghost smoke your way up through that. It's really rewarding when you do figure out a puzzle piece, but assuming that you get there, because some of these puzzles are long and it's lots of exploration if you're playing without a guide.
Yeah, and I think like obviously back in the day we didn't have internet access, there were no Prima guides, and this game isn't talked about as often as a lot of other games. So I think the lack of maps online would suggest that this is definitely a lesser talked about title. But and just going back to what you said about flying over the walls, there's this cheat. You start off and you've got the manor where you start, and there's the big swirl on the floor.
Yeah.
I think there's an L1, R1, R2 combination. You can fly right to the top into a room where all of the keys and all of the puzzle pieces.
Are you kidding?
There's plenty of broccoli in there.
There's a secret room with tons of broccoli.
There's a secret room, dude. Yeah,
That's amazing.
seriously. It's so. I know. Well, you'll have to try it. If you do anything else with this game, you've got to get that cheat and go into the secret.
That's great.
That's so representative of that era of gaming. I feel like cheats used to be such a big deal back in the PS1 era, like with Grand Theft Auto and some other games. Like they had Easter eggs and button combinations.
They don't do as much anymore, do they? Huh.
No, not at all.
We used to like go into the bookstores and read them out the back of the magazines and write them down on our hands, like L1, R1, square, circle, and then just leave.
Sure. No, like pre-internet or like when internet was all over the place. You had to get creative, and that was one of the tactics that we used for sure. Gemma, I'm curious as to what is one of your favorite upgrades to Casper. We've mentioned it a few times. We haven't really talked about any of them much. Out of like all the different things, and Casper can end up doing. Doesn't he end up getting like 8 or so different upgrades or abilities that he can use? What's one of your favorite?
I really like the ball, the bouncing ball, and you can like bounce through the window because it's the physics are awful. They're absolutely shocking. But I just enjoyed it. It's kind of weird even just talking about it. I'm sat here talking about this bouncing ball ghost thinking, what?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun.
Kenny, Nolan, what about you guys?
Honestly, the first one you get,
Smoke?
I did not get far. The morph smoke.
Yeah.
The game, to be honest with you, was pretty stale. At first, I was like, ooh, this is going to get repetitive. But when that opened up for you and you can start using the vents that I saw the whole time, but didn't think anything of until now, I could go in them. And it really kind of opened up what I thought was going to be a really dull map. So that first one just is nice, even though it doesn't really, it's not that great, but...
Only because it was so ridiculous, I'm gonna say the saw blade.
The buzzsaw.
Because there's these doors. Like we've already whined about he can't go through a wall, but like maybe you can't go through a wall. But there are doors that are covered just literally by like two by fours in like
some
an
of
X.
them, some of them
like,
aren't
hammered
even
up.
doors. That's just an open like
It's literally
archway
an
with
open
two
door
with
that
an
like
X.
I, as a large full-size man adult, could have just crawled through and avoided the barrier. No problem. Nothing is stopping me from going through this door. But my ghost, character, Casper, can't go through this door, and it was so ridiculous to me. And you can't find keys for him, so at first you're just like, are you just taunting me? Like, what's this about? And then you turn into a giant saw blade, cut them open to get through, and it's ridiculous, but it made me laugh.
You got to get creative with video games. You got to have something in there like that.
Yeah, I mean, I like both of those. I think I think he can turn into like a spring and a hammer, and there's one like super ability at the end where he's supposed to get like super big and scares away any kind of enemy or something. I just thought that it was creative that there were these different kind of abilities that Casper had. Like, they didn't have to do that. In a lot of puzzle games, your character doesn't upgrade, right? He just gets he gets keys or the buttons and different things like that. But they decided to take it to another level, which does, like you said, Nolan, move it from, like if it's getting stale, here's kind of like a shift to the system.
It's
and
like
then
a little
if it's getting
push
stale
for
again,
you.
here's a little push forward for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it from a design point of view, it's really nice too because they can reuse some of those spaces. With all of the like map of this mansion pre-rendered, if you're walking back and forth just going through doors, there's only so much you can do. But because you can go back and then jump through a window you couldn't go before, or go through, so there's like a practical aspect of that too from a design element that lets them get a lot bigger sort of space as a game. And it also just feels real rewarding. Dustin says this game reminds him of Resident Evil, and like, that's ridiculous, but this game totally reminds me of Metroid.
I never said that, by the way.
I said that, first of all. Second of all, Metroid?
Non-linear map where progression is gated behind upgrades.
We're not
it's
doing
totally
this.
good.
We have submitted the most outlandish games for this game to be compared to. But
I never really thought of it like that. You've really opened my eyes, actually.
no, but improperly. Like, there's no... I think one more thing for us to talk about in the gameplay section are these quote-unquote boss fights with your angry uncles. Like, you've got... That's kind of like big milestones, is that you have to get these abilities and get certain unlockables or items. That's what it is. This is one of the frustrating things where it's kind of unintuitive, is that there are some seemingly random items throughout the game. A camera, some perfume, different things like that.
The iron weight.
Yeah, and the game doesn't tell you what to do with them. No? And you don't know unless you, I guess, just try everything. There's some huge hints on some of them. Like, you find glue at one point, and I think you come into one of your uncle's Stretch, whatever his name is, and he says like, this is a sticky situation or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's a hard clue. Oh, wow. I'm going to use the glue. But for the other ones, there's not necessarily a clue. Like, for one of the bosses, you beat him because I think it's Fatso, he's in the tub, and you take the camera and take a picture of him, and he gets embarrassed.
Fresh.
But how would you know that?
No, I don't know.
It's a tricky game. It is a tricky game.
And that's one thing here, I guess. Is it a kid's game, or was it meant for an older, teenage audience? Is it too hard for a kid's game? It's easy to get into a little bit because it's just find a key, open a door. But then I feel like it kind of gets difficult fairly quickly.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of like my friends, they played it with their families, so you'd have like older people kind of helping out, chipping in. But I think if I sat my little nephew down, 6, 7 years old, he wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah.
He'd be like, Auntie Gemma, get this out, put Mario on, sort of thing. So I actually think I don't think it knew its target audience, but. Yeah,
I think that's right. And I also think that like game publishers / like the corporate side of the gaming industry didn't know audiences either. And so it's almost their fault then instead of the developers, and this is true for a lot of movie / video game releases. I just feel like the audience is wrong half the time, and it ends up being a little more challenging than maybe they intended.
And I think if it wasn't like, imagine that game, if it wasn't Casper, if it was like something completely unrelated, like it wasn't based on a film, we didn't know who the characters were, it would have flopped because, I think it just sold on the name of the Casper, that brand. The film had just come out. There was a bit of a buzz. But yeah, like, who knows? The target audience, it's kind of all over the place.
We do talk about how like difficult this game was, and it was really difficult. There were some things that, between walls that you can't move through as a ghost and just the like endless exploration and having to keep track of things and tons of items. It was hard. It was challenging. But we've also kind of not talked about just how charming this game is, which I think is sort of important. And maybe it fits better as we get into how this game has aged.
Aged.
Yeah, I think it looks, I don't know if we're going to talk about this now, but from my perspective, one of the things that really draws me to it even now is just how well it looks. It's really smooth. The load times aren't too bad. I just think Whipstaff Man, it's full of charm. And the maze, the outside, the upstairs, the downstairs, the secret room with all the broccoli. Wow, who wouldn't want that?
I totally agree about the charm. I think the charm is there, but I've got to disagree with you, Gemma, about the loading times.
Yep.
I don't know if it was my PlayStation, my emulator that was going on, but for having to switch rooms so often, you're hitting the loading screen often, like so frequently, that maybe it's not the longest loading times, but it's so often that does begin to add up. And I felt
like
that.
For PlayStation, though, it was kind of quick. I know it happened often, but when it did happen, it was over in a second or two. Like, I don't know.
It's like a split second. It's not like a 30. I mean, if you think of Resident Evil, when you're going through doors and then you've got that loading time, I found that was quite a frequent thing, but it's, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit quicker in Casper than Resident Evil, actually.
There were definitely that era of games, especially PlayStation, where like you hit a load screen and I'd be like, oh, I'm going to go grab a snack. I'll be right back. Because it sometimes would almost be minutes to kind of load a whole next area. And, the assets here weren't as big. You did hit those switches a lot. And I was finding myself being in Dustin's camp of kind of wishing they'd been able to include a little bit more per load just so that, or space them out so it didn't have to happen as often. I didn't mind how long it took, but you do a lot of load screen transitions just because there's a lot of places to roam around. Like it's big.
Yeah, it is, and like you said a second ago, they're not that long. I think for me, if there was like that many load screens and they were like 15, 20 plus seconds, I would have been so bored.
Yeah. Something that this is probably just my preference, and y'all might disagree with me. I think the level design here is actually pretty good. It's a sprawling mansion. So and you've got those three parts, and there's backtracking, but I think that's part of the game. Like that, I think that's intentional. And to me, it didn't feel repetitive. And I kind of liked how some of the rooms were linked with the vent. It required some memorization, which was frustrating. So I totally agree on there needing to be like a map, but for what they were trying to do, I thought the level design could have been much, much worse. It was pretty good.
If there was, just out of interest, if there was a map included with this game, would that have raised your enjoyment level, do you think, or not?
Like in the literature or in the game itself?
Yeah, like in say or you press start and there's a map, or you get it with your instruction manual, like you do a GTA map.
If it's in the game itself, I think it's got to be one that like you self fill in. So as you go into the areas that maybe it reveals those. If it just gives it to you from the start, I think that's showing too much, because a lot of the game is exploration. If you've got an imprint, then I guess it's got to show you everything at one time. I would be it's a puzzle game, so you're supposed to get lost, but I think a good puzzle game means that you start to get familiar with the layout of the building and the level. And I did. I never figured out the garden maze, but once you get through there, you don't really have to go back much. But once I had traversed through Whipstaff Manor enough times, I was pretty familiar with it. So I would have enjoyed probably an in-game like updated map that just gradually updates, shows you
populate.
Yeah, because one thing that I never remembered was where those vents were going to take me. I just went in and hoped that I was showing up in the right place.
Oh yeah.
Well, another thing about the level design that stood out was the way that you'll come across early on some of the, like, for instance, when you turn into the morph ball, you can go through these little windows in the wall to a different room. And you'll see that early on and be confused because how do I get in that room? But then like it clicks when you find the ball and you're like, oh, I can get to that room now. And I always appreciate that backtracking aspect as long as it's not too crazy. So a map would have helped me. Yes. Just an updating map. But yeah, I don't know. I just think I think going into this, I expected a lot less on that front. So hats off to the developers.
I think if a map was included, it probably would have been a little bit more kid-friendly.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe where the confusion lies. Is this for like a child? If so, what age? Or is it like kind of like teen/adult kind of game on that thinking level? But yeah, a map. I would have liked a map as a kid anyway back in the day, but that's just because I'm a geek and I like weird things like that.
No, those are always really fun. I didn't have a problem with the fact that you had to explore a lot. My main problem on the whole, map, not map front is just that as you were unlocking things, so many of the things that you found or unlocked were then completely somewhere else. And I would prefer if in a puzzle kind of game, if it was either something really obvious where you were going to use it because of in-game clues, or, you grab an item, you flip a switch, and immediately something that you can see changes. This was a lot of like, flip a switch, go explore the whole house, and hope you can realize which door is open now that wasn't before. And so there's just some sort of unclarity that you had to kind of muddle your way through, and that's tough. But yeah, definitely puzzle games. They're tough to future-proof, and a lot of the things that we've talked about in terms of this game and things that we're having problems with were kind of technology-based. There's some hurdles there, but I'm curious what else you guys thought about some of the other ways this game aged. We haven't touched on the music yet, but I thought that was absolutely top notch.
I thought the music was stellar, and very beautiful and very on theme. I did think that it was a little redundant. And one of the major problems is that you're constantly switching rooms. And so after a loading screen, the song starts over from the beginning. And so you're hearing that first bit over and over again. It's a pretty bit, but you're going to hear it a lot. And there weren't tons of different tracks. You've got, I think how it's kind of set up is you've got one track for the manor, one track for like the attic basement type areas, one track for like boss areas, and then another track for the outside. I think it's something like that. And they're all beautiful, especially
like
the like
quality.
basement attic one. Say that again.
Like movie quality, it sounded like the soundtrack.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's like
definitely.
It's straight in there with all of that. And I thought they were very pretty. I just think that they're very redundant.
I'd say that's fair. It's funny as you mention it, I can kind of hear the song in my head now, and it just plays over and over and over. I think I agree with that, Dustin, definitely.
That happens a lot in these games that we play, 15 plus years later. You start to notice things like that. And I think back then maybe you did, but I think we're so spoiled now with like, I don't know, huge OSTs and these graphics. And then you go back and you're like, why is this song playing again?
Sure. And like I said, it's beautiful music. And so it's like, I'd rather, if it's going to be repetitive, give me something beautiful to listen to. At least it wasn't, terrible. But the graphics, we've talked about charm. What did you guys think about the graphics? Do you think that ages well, that it's pretty to look at, that the character models are good?
Man, that ghost was so hard to see, though, right, Nolan?
Oh, gosh.
It was not too bad. Casper's, I can't believe he thought it was hard to see, but I guess to each their own, I guess.
He's a cute little boy, and I think
that
translates.
He's lush.
He's got little voice cues too at different times. And anytime, I love this. And a game actually gets a few points in my book. Anytime there is an animation for when you don't move around your character too much. And Casper has both an animation and a little voice cue when you haven't moved him around enough. And I think that's always great.
Yeah. It's got, like you said, it's the charm, isn't it? It's got charm.
The graphics as a whole, I've gotta say, did not connect with me. So it looks a lot like a point and click, the way those games would look. Just it's pre-rendered and it's a top-down-ish view, not isometric. It's top-down, but it's at kind of a weird angle, so you can see in the rooms and like on the walls where you need to see. But I don't know. There was something about the stagnant nature of the graphics, like a chair that's just not rocking. Like its rocking animation is just the chair, like a picture of a chair moving. That was a little dated to me, and it was noticeable.
Yeah, I do feel like the strength in the art and animation is in the ghost characters. I think the uncles and Casper himself are the best there. I think the worst flaw of the graphics are Kat and her father. They look like cardboard cutouts there on the bed.
Awful.
And then I do think it's a neutral kind of give or take when it comes to the buildings itself and like the chairs and the couches and the boxes and barrels and different things like that. That can be a give or take thing. And I think that's kind of what you're referencing, Nolan. But I do think the ghosts themselves, the ones that are really kind of the highlight of the game, they look and animate really well.
And the animation for all his different forms is also really on point.
Yeah, I think with you mentioning like the chairs and things there, it's very cookie cutter. Like the same chair you'll see throughout the manor. I would have liked it on the whole if that was kind of spiced up a little bit. But do you know what, guys? I really like the graphics.
Yeah.
It really appeals to me. I think everything looks really smooth. A lot of games that you go back to now on PS1 are, you think, well, holy smokes, look at the polygon size on that. But this is really smooth for me. It's just super easy on the eye. And funnily enough, I mean, the colour palette's really drab, and I usually go with games that have bright popping colours. But this, again, I don't know why, it just really works for me. The browns, the oranges,
It kind of fits the manner, like it's Casper-ish.
Yes, absolutely.
Do we know if the SNES version and the million other versions of the game look the same and play the same?
No, the SNES version is awful.
Oh, really?
Is it really?
Absolutely. I absolutely cannot stand it. In fact, when we spoke about this, and I thought to myself, because there's 2 Casper games on PS1 as well, and I thought, oh no, I hope they've got the right Casper game. And then when I saw your YouTube video, I was like, yes! But the SNES one, don't go near it. It's awful.
Oh, wow.
I will say that in the SNES one, Casper can go through walls. So give or take, whatever you think.
More lore accurate, but looks terrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Final thoughts.
At the end of each and every one of our episodes, we determine whether or not our game gets our vote for New Game Plus status, which is our general thumbs up or thumbs down. It does require a majority vote. And so we've established that 3 out of 4 is more difficult to get than 2 out of 3, which is our standard. And so we're going to go one at a time, and you're going to give it your vote, yes or no, thumbs up, thumbs down. Is this a game that you would encourage our viewership, our audience, to find a copy and to play? It's worth playing today in 2019, or to reserve their retro video game time for another game and push this one to the side, go and play a different one. Gemma, we allow our guests to go first, so have the floor. Yes or no, maybe give your final thoughts and opinions on this game that you brought before us today.
Okay, well, obviously for me, it's a massive thumbs up. I think a lot of my audience have really connected with this. If I've ever mentioned it on a YouTube video or on social media, people have leapt on it and said that they've really, really enjoyed it. It's also on Sega Saturn, so depending on which console you prefer, you can snag a copy on the PS1 for a couple of quid, or a couple of bucks in your case. We say a couple of quid on Saturn or PS1. So a couple of quid, couple of hours. I think you'll have fun with it. It's a thumbs up.
Nice. That is one affirmative.
Yeah.
Kenny? You go next.
I hate going next. Only because I'm so torn on this one. And
Everybody sit back. It'll be about a half
honest.
hour, and
Be
he'll give his
honest.
opinion.
No, I always do make these too long, so I'm going to try and be tight. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go with my gut. It's a charming game. The genre is hard to do well. There's definitely some things that it doesn't do perfectly. You're going to be a little bit lost. You're going to feel like you're being a little bit repetitive and walking back and forth. And Nolan was right when he said it kind of reminds me of a point and click in some of those aspects. Lots of exploration. But it does those things better than a lot of the equivalent kind of games. And so while that's not something I'm generally drawn to as a game style and title, this one had enough cool elements with the, morphing into different things to get further on, that it was fun to me and it was charming. It's hard. Go into it knowing that it's not going to be real easy, but it's going to be rewarding when you do get through it. And so I'm going to say, for me, it is just barely New Game Plus worthy. So thumbs up hesitantly for me.
That is 2 affirmatives to yes. Nolan?
Yeah, I'll go next. So you can't see the ghost. Resident Evil's better. No, I'm just kidding.
We're the worst podcast.
Yeah, we're the worst podcast. What else? No, look, I unfortunately have a bias against video games based on movies outright, which is wrong of me to do, but I've been burned enough times that it's just what I default to. So Casper game, I come in thinking, well, this better be, well, I just come in thinking it's not going to be good. And it was not a bad game. However, I don't know if I'd recommend it today because I think those things that Kenny was just mentioning, those different aspects of exploration and maybe some of the visual representation of the game are hurdles that are hard to get over, I think, for a modern gamer, for someone to jump back into it today. So I do not give it New Game Plus, and I also am sorry.
Don't be sorry. It's your opinion. Yeah. It's all good.
Dustin, I think that leaves it up to you.
Your opinion is wrong. No, yeah. So that's that. It does come down to me whether or not I give it my vote. I totally get why this game might have a split audience. If you are someone who is unfamiliar with the character or the movie, this game might not click with you. Furthermore, if you don't like puzzle games, then, I mean, you'll probably strongly just automatically dislike this game. But I know Casper. He's my friend.
No.
Wow,
And
there you go.
I enjoy a good puzzle game. I don't think it's like an excellent, just going to blow your mind puzzle type title. And I do think after kind of listening to us discuss this, I do think probably the best way to play this game today is to share the experience with someone else, like a friend or family member, sit down with a few people, put it on the big screen, play through, work through it together. Some of the quirks in this game is fine with me because I love PlayStation era graphics and flair and charm. And I think that this game by Interplay has all of that. And so Casper works for me. It receives my vote, meaning Casper for the PlayStation is New Game Plus certified.
But only if people
real.
play it collaboratively. You want Twitch plays Casper?
Casper is New Game Plus certified. But what do you guys think? Kathy wrote in and she said, this is my first time playing along, so I thought I'd send in my thoughts. While this game wasn't terrible like I was expecting, it wasn't very good. They gave you almost no direction as to what to do, no guidance on the controls, and I felt like I was just going in circles trying to figure out what keys go where and what to do with the items. For what I'm assuming is a kid's game, they didn't make it easy. Also, I don't think I heard any other music besides that one track that plays while you're walking, floating around, and it got annoying very quick. I made it to Act 3, but quit because I couldn't figure out how to use the ball mechanic and then just didn't have time to go back after that. Keep up the good work, and I can't wait to see what you'll be playing in the future.
Kathy, you got to go to the broccoli room.
The broccoli room has all of your answers.
Some broccoli.
I get it. If you're unfamiliar with the PlayStation and the different controls, and then first time you're going to be lost a little bit, but I really do think that this game could benefit from some kind of community bringing some kind of like page online. It doesn't need a full wiki, but it does need a page that has a different map so that someone could use as a walkthrough and a little step-by-step guide, as well as it just needs a good game facts page, and it doesn't have that. So if there's any hardcore Casper fans out there, serve the retro gaming community and make
Gemma
a page.
Can do it.
There we go. I've got a new task.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Jake also wrote in and said, I remember how I played this game when I was little, but I literally stopped at the very beginning because I was too scared to continue.
That's great.
So I forced my mom to play since I was curious how the game went. My mom hated me at the end because I always screamed in fright, causing my mom to panic and to lose a lot. Everything in this game was perfect. Music, puzzles, art, style. It was hard but addictive. New Game Plus status for me.
Can we talk about how cute it is that their mom played for them?
That's the collaborative aspect.
Yeah, I love that.
That's where it's at. Yeah, it's the heart of it. Family gaming.
You got to play this game with your mom, and you're going to love it.
It really is the difference, though, because Kathy brought up a good point. If you try to play this as an actual kids game, if that's the lens you view it at, it's way too hard. They overdid it. But if you're assuming that it's kid supervised, it'll actually become a really cool, like, kind of collaborative experience. So I like the like dual perspectives on the same thing.
But it is time for us to put aside Casper. Hey, thank you guys for sending in your commentary. You can do that each and every week. Send your thoughts to ngppodcast@gmail.com. You'll have a chance this week to write in for a new game. Each and every week, we play a new retro game that is randomly selected from our giant retro master list. That can be found on all of our social media sites, a link to that. We've got well over 100, close to 1,000 games on there. That's very different than 100. And it's games that are 15 years old or older, any console, any genre. Send in your game suggestions. We'll add them to the list. For now, we're going to put Casper to the side, and we're going to randomly select what we're going to be playing next.
Real quick before you hit that randomize button.
Yes.
Gemma, we always like to ask our guests. You gave us one old game suggestion that we loved getting the chance to play through with you. But is there any other old title that you think, whether it's on the list or not, ought to be included that we can ensure gets its way onto the Retro Master list? Any other old classics that you think are fun for us to include?
Oh, good question. Resident Evil. No, I'm only joking. What about Turtles in Time?
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
It's one that I played. Because of that, I'm pretty sure it is on our list. So we'll just go ahead and give you credit for putting it there, because that one was, I think, my favorite of the Ninja Turtle games.
Dude, it is so much fun, like a ton of fun. Like when you play it now, you can beat it in like 25 minutes, but back in the day, it took a good couple of hours. It's a great game. Great game.
I know that Turtles in Time is on there. I think we've even played it on the podcast, actually.
You say that. We may have. I may be thinking
Ninja
of Manhattan Project as the one that I liked so much.
Oh, no, we may have played that one. I don't know. When we get to 172 games, like, they get lost in there.
They get blurry. But the Turtle series in general is great. So it's a wonderful suggestion, having played it or not, or needing to. So
either way, we'll make sure that it's in the Retro Master list. For now, we're going to randomly select, so hold on to your butts and as we randomize. We're going RPG style.
Oh, yes. It's been a while.
We're going Mega Drive Genesis.
What?
All right.
1990 in Japan, 91 in North America, and 91 in the UK. I need to include that as well.
Yeah, there you go.
Developed and published by a small company called Sega.
Never heard of them.
Yeah. It's a part of a collection, and it is the third in the collection. The game that we're going to be playing for the next 7 days is Phantasy Star 3 Generations
Wow.
of Doom.
Do you know about
Wow.
this one, Gemma?
I know, I mean, the Phantasy Star series in general, I think, is quite prominent. This particular title, no, so I'll be tuning in.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm eager. Let's get
I've
it.
never
Awesome.
heard of the series at all.
I've like distantly heard of the series, definitely never played any of the titles, but Sega Genesis has captured my heart since we started this podcast. And
I'm
so
so glad to hear that.
I'm excited to play.
Be sure to join us in Discord this week. We're going to be talking about that game and all kinds of things. So you can get a free invite to our Discord server if you go to our Twitter page and you look in our bio. We also have t-shirts available. You can also find a link on our Twitter somewhere. And pick up one of our shirts. We have 4 unique designs made by Hookshot, and they're very cool. We also just released our first mini-series, 6 episodes that you can listen to all at once if you want to, at the same time. Like pull them all up, all 6, and then hit
Like,
play at the same time.
Actually, simultaneously?
Yeah,
That'd
yeah.
be terrible.
No,
it's kind,
you
no,
can.
it's kind of like that band soundtrack with Wizard of Oz type thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, is it Pink
Secret
Floyd?
messages
Whoever.
encoded.
Yeah.
You'll want to definitely check out the secret message behind that. You can go and listen to that on SoundCloud. That's also on Twitter. Just go to our Twitter and find all this stuff.
I want to say a big thank you to the following people. Macaulay McCulkin for increasing his monthly support on Patreon.
Hey,
Thank you,
thanks.
Macaulay.
All of our producer level. Isn't that a great screen name?
Yeah,
it made me laugh so hard the first time. All of our producer level supporters, we also want to give a big shout out to. That's Michael, Bill, Zion, Dear Baby, and Alex. You guys go above and beyond in supporting what we do on the podcast, and we're so appreciative. And of course, last but certainly not least, a very, very big thank you to our special guest this week. We know it takes a lot to give up your time and energy to just talk about a random old game that you like with a bunch of guys you've never bet before today. And so thanks so much for coming and hanging out with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been awesome. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Gemma, where can our listeners find you online?
Okay, so we got on YouTube, youtube.com/TheGebs24. That's TheGebs24. Everything in terms of social media is the same. It's at TheGebs24, Insta, Facebook, except for Twitter, which is at Juicy Game Review. Which corresponds with my website. Oh my God. www.juicygamereviews.com.
If you type in Google TheGebs24, you're going to find all of her stuff. So make sure you do that. She's got tons of content. Jim, I mentioned it
Awesome
kind of
content.
off episode earlier, but you produce, I mean, pretty much daily videos, don't you? You're like crazy consistent.
Yeah, but a lot of people say that. I've never really thought of it like that. I think it's like, I mean, because I work full time and then I do this part time. I don't know. I don't really, when I stopped and think about it, I don't actually do anything else other than that. So yeah, I guess there is a level of consistency there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Impressive. I echo what Kenny said. We loved having you as a guest on the show today. Hope to bring you back someday, and now forever, whether you like it or not, you're a friend of the show. So
Oh, thanks, guys.
you can find us on social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch at NGP Podcast. We've got regular YouTube content, not near as regular as the Gebs, on our YouTube channel, New Game Plus Podcast. You can listen to us on any podcast provider of your choice. Make sure you subscribe so that you're the first to get new NGP episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a kind rating and review. This episode was edited and produced by our good friend Tom Tate. Join us next week as we play Phantasy Star 3 Generations of Doom. Until then, I'm still Dustin.
I'm Kenny.
I'm Nolan.
And that's Gemma, TheGebs24. And this has been New Game Plus.